Thanks again for joining us today. Hoping you're finding these sessions valuable. It's now time to take a look at best practices for achieving ransomware immunity. We thought we'll start today's journey with the end in mind. Everything that I'm about to present to you today is designed to help you achieve a level of confidence that will help you and your organization deal better with this very real threat that we know of as ransomware. These examples on the screen are just a few of the clients we've helped with architecting an environment virtually immune to a ransomware threat. This does not mean they're impervious to an attack. What it does mean is that they will always have an alternative to paying a ransom and never be in a position where they're unable to recover their data. There are a host of benefits we could highlight beyond what you see on the screen, and we'll dive deeper into each of these examples later in the presentation. For now, let me just present some highlights. For Liberty, we're able to help standardize on Veritas data protection, storage virtualization, and long-term retention. Combined, their recovery times move from days to just hours, and they've just already put to the test having faced a ransomware attack recently. Because of the architected solutions, they were down for only 6 hours with their 100% recovery success of their data. When asked to estimate how long it would have taken them with the previous setup, they said a minimum of 48 hours. In a world where downtime costs $2.3 million per hour, that is significant savings. Their setup is so smooth now that they're able to embrace many other digital transformation initiatives without their backups barring the gate. For Steelcase, yet another example of the benefits of standardizing data protection in Veritas. In this case, the executive team was particularly worried about their ability to recover following a ransomware attack. With their dense setup, full recovery of certain systems was estimated to take 2 weeks or longer, and this was certainly unacceptable. We built for them a solution that would help them take that recovery time from weeks to hours. This has helped save them a ton of money for sure, but more importantly, given them the confidence to deal with ransomware where it rears its ugly head. As Greg mentioned earlier in his opening keynote, ransomware is scary, but we don't need to cower in fear of ransomware if we're prepared. And that's what we're going to be talking about to you today. I think we're all aware of the cybersecurity threat posed by ransomware. To frame our discussions, I have 3 points for you to consider. First, did you realize that in just the first half of this year, through June, there have already been more ransomware attacks globally than the entirety of 2020? 305 million to be exact. In fact, experts predicted that by June of 2021, there will be one ransomware attack every 11 seconds. Crazy, right? Though there were 78 million attacks just in June, if you do some simple math, you'll quickly realize that ransomware attacks in June occurred at a frequency of 30 per second. The difference between that and one every 11 seconds is 2.5 orders of magnitude. As far as using models to accurately predict outcomes, that one was one way off. In fairness, I don't think anyone really anticipated the growth of ransomware as a service and how easy it is to acquire. There's an entire black market for it, with folks willing to help you get started with nothing more than a simple profit-sharing model. Secondly, as I've mentioned earlier, we recently did a very extensive research project titled The Vulnerability Gap. The premise was to test whether the accelerated digital transformation undergone by many organizations through the last 18 months of a global pandemic left holes or gaps in these organizations' ability to manage digital risk. With respect to ransomware attacks, we found that on average, organizations were hit with a downtime inducing attack 2.57 times over the last 12 months. This isn't the total number of attacks they endured, which would likely be a much higher number. This is the number of attacks that actually led to significant downtime for the business. And lastly, many suspect that by the end of 2021, ransomware would have cost $20 billion in damages to the global economy. To be honest, I wonder if we haven't already surpassed that. Regardless, attacks are penetrating with increasing frequency and alarming damage potential. And while security protections and technology are incredibly important, alone, they are also insufficient. As Greg and Jim alluded to earlier, a multi-layered approach is needed. We host many clients in either a physical or virtual executive briefing setting, and almost universally, clients inevitably ask how Veritas can help them solve three main challenges with respect to ransomware. First, how can I reduce the chance of a ransomware attack if successful? Second, if an attack is successful, how can I limit the impact and disruption to my business? And finally, when I turn to my backup to recover data, applications, and business operations, how can I be sure that I'm doing so from a clean copy of data? These were the same questions we helped Liberty, Cypress Trading, and Steelcase address. And before we get into the actual how we're going to go about doing that, I'd like you to consider a few things with respect to each of these main challenges. In terms of how I can reduce the chance an attack is successful, consider stop viewing this as preventing ransomware from getting into your IT environment. Assume it's already there. According to research, 35% of your data is still dark. Not knowing what data you have, whether it's valuable or whether it's adequately protected, is a vulnerability threat actors can exploit. On top of that, over the last 12 months to COVID and accelerated transformation, senior IT leaders feel security hasn't kept up. This is yet another major concern that should be fixed. You can't stop an attack from being successful if you don't have the right security solutions in place to help. In terms of if an attack is successful, how can I limit the disruption? Consider, hackers are smart and they will be as thorough as possible. They want to give you no choice but to pay their ransom. Therefore, before ever launching the ransomware, there's a good chance that they will look to target and disrupt your ability to recover from the eventual attack by deleting backups or the backups application entirely. This will extend the amount of time you'll be down for following the attack, and downtime, as we know, is expensive. The latest estimate is roughly $2.3 million per hour for enterprise-sized organization. In fact, we did some research last year and asked how long organizations were down for following significant ransomware attacks. 38% of folks indicated that they were down for a week or longer. Now, let me ask you, could your business endure that? In terms of how I can know I'm recovering from clean data, consider this. A growing trend is to use DDoS attacks as a red herring. These attacks are meant to distract security teams and hide the planting of ransomware within the environment. You may not even know ransomware is in your systems, possibly getting backed up and replicated along with the rest of your data. That ransomware may lie in wait for days or weeks before it's actually launched. During that time, hackers are looking for ways to limit your options, such as deleting your backups. This is one of the major reasons why 60% of folks still pay ransoms, despite the fact that they know doing so makes them an even bigger target for subsequent attacks. The point being, hackers are crafty, planting ransomware in new creative ways that ransomware stays dormant until the point it can do the most damage, increasing the likelihood that you will pay. Let's say you're trying to recover your data following a successful attack. How do you know that the images that you're restoring aren't also infected with the same ransomware? And if you're unsure, you may actually opt to pay the ransom anyway. As I mentioned, nearly every customer that comes to talk with Veritas about ransomware resiliency wants answers to these questions. And all of them can be answered by a multi-layered strategy grounded in best practices. At Veritas, there are two major constructs that we adhere to that should give you confidence that your approach is firmly grounded in established guidance and best practices. This would be Zero Trust and the NIST Cybersecurity framework. Now, let's look at some highlights of the Zero Trust first. Zero Trust is the latest idea making its round throughout IT and security conversations everywhere. Much of what is represented in Zero Trust are principles that are pretty table stakes from a security perspective. Veritas appliances, for example, have embodied multiple layers of Zero Trust principles since the beginning, an advantage of having been conceived while we were still part of a security company. Having said that, there are some important reminders and best practices we glean from a Zero Trust discussion. Going back to our first questions of reducing the chance of an attack is successful, and the understanding that the backup environment is among the primary initial targets of an attack, it's extremely important that multi-factor authentication and role-based access control are in place. Using encryption for data at rest and in flight will reduce the usability and therefore the threat posed by data exfiltration. As Greg mentioned in his beginning remarks, no one with access to primary data should also have access to secondary data. Yes, some silos are good and necessary. And it's not just about limiting access, but limiting communication, executable processes, as well as user access. And of course, security analytics software and other anomaly detection capabilities are key components of preventing a successful attack. All of this and more are already part of our approach to data protection and management. So the takeaway, any company initiative around building a Zero Trust security model will be aided and supported by Veritas capabilities. And we'll love to help you meet those objectives. The US NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, put out a cybersecurity framework that was a collaborative work across public and private sector organizations. The framework has been adopted and leveraged either directly or as the basis for similar guidance by a variety of other countries. Of the 5 sections of the NIST cybersecurity framework, Veritas Solutions directly addresses 3: protect, detect, and recover. In accordance with the NIST recommendation, it's important that you're able to protect all your data, regardless of the source of that data. This is at least half of the reasons you should see messaging from Veritas around edge, core, and cloud. Veritas will help ensure your data, regardless of its location, is protected appropriately. Next, Veritas will help you detect threats in your environment, either through direct scanning for malware or via the telltale signs that something out of the ordinary and potentially malicious is occurring. And in very differentiated fashion, Veritas will help ensure you can recover your data from anywhere to anywhere. Meaning with Veritas, you have options that keep you in control. If you want to recover to bare metal, for example, no problem. To the cloud, of course. Back to the original source, whatever makes sense for your business will enable you. And while this certainly isn't an exhaustive list when it comes to standards and certifications compliance, Veritas is well ahead of the game. You've heard Greg, Jim, and now me speak about the importance of a multi-layered strategy based on best practices. We'll build a data protection and management solution with Zero Trust in its DNA. We've aligned our capabilities to ensure you can help you closely align to industry standards like NIST. Now, let's dive deeper into each of the pillars of protect, detect, and recover. As I mentioned previously, it's important to make sure all your data is protected. No data protection company out there is going to support more enterprise workloads than Veritas. The fact that Veritas supports over 800 plus data sources and growing is one of the main reasons companies like Steelcase and Cypress can standardize on Veritas. In addition to the efficiency this gains, it also simplifies recovery from large-scale outages or ransomware attacks, which is what we're about to talk about today. Also, hackers go after AD credentials. Using those credentials, they will first look to compromise the backup system, deleting backups, and thus leaving organizations with little choice but to pay their ransom. We've observed many examples of this in recent months. A Threat Post article posted at the end of September outline exactly how the Conti ransomware gang goes about demolishing your Veeam backups. NetBackup is not susceptible to this kind of exploitation, especially on NetBackup appliances, which is probably a reason why the group mainly targets Veeam customers. Host-based intrusion prevention is just one element of a bulletproof platform, but it's worth calling out here. As yet another layer to protect you, Veritas delivers industry-leading immutability in more ways than anyone else out there. Immutability is supported via third-party target devices, our own appliances, which is the ideal solution, or out of the cloud, as in the case of AWS S3 Object Lock, for example. Now, in terms of detect, Veritas can help you detect malware in a number of ways. The most efficient of these is to spot check high-risk areas post-backup, things like internet-facing Windows clients, for example. And then importantly, prior to restoring any backup, we can scan the image itself to help ensure clean data. We also support near real-time AI-powered anomaly detection, which can help you recognize indicators that an attack might be underway. And lastly, with Veritas, you get total infrastructure visibility, edge to core to cloud. In fact, the visibility we offer here is not contained to just our own solution. Veritas can even help you recognize unprotected or underprotected data in our competitors' product as well. Finally, for recovery. First off, this is the whole reason you're backing up data in the first place, right? So that you can recover it, not just recover, but to do it quickly. To that end, we will help you automate complete recovery orchestration. It's not a stretch to say that we can actually do that with a single click. You have your choice of recovery targets. Choose and go. Using this same recovery orchestration, we can test a restore to a sandbox environment without impacting the production environment at all. One of the reasons organizations are so terrible at testing their DR plans is because they're disruptive to production, but not with Veritas. In addition, we have instant access to restore directly in backup storage as well as CDP rollback for when recovery times are particularly demanding. Let's dive in. Step 1, protect. Your environment is expensive and continuing to grow. Likely, it includes some mix of the logos we see here, if not all of them. It is important to be able to protect not just part, ideally in a way that will help to optimize a recovery in a worst-case scenario. We find this works best when you are using fewer and not more tools, ideally with just one platform. Veritas is able to extend ransomware protection to over 800 data sources with NetBackup. This protection can be simple to implement, starting with a primary server that tracks all aspects of the environment, and then extending to various NetBackup services that can be dispersed to handle the load of data being protected. This architecture means environments can scale to literally any size. The flexibility of NetBackup protection includes the ways in which we can provide immutable storage. Immutability means that one's written data cannot be changed by any method, including ransomware, for the duration selected. Veritas doesn't shoehorn a one-size-fits-all method. We actually provide options when it comes to immutability. For the most secure option, we provide immutable storage as part of our hardened, purpose-built backup appliances, where we store this data efficiently, leveraging deduplication technology. Also, we can connect with third-party hardware that has immutability capabilities. We can also extend immutable capabilities with support for AWS S3 Object Lock. Veritas is the only vendor that can write this data directly from on-prem immutable storage to AWS S3 immutable storage, maintaining dedupe efficiency throughout this lifecycle of this data. Importantly, Veritas provides insurance, ensuring that there will be no single point of failure, ensuring that your information, not only the metadata, but the images themselves, can be replicated to secondary or tertiary domains that, of course, are deduped and have all the same storage options. Another point that often gets glossed over is the host-based intrusion prevention capabilities of our NetBackup appliances, including Flex and FlexScale. As I mentioned earlier, one of the ways threat actors will limit your options to pay the ransom is simply by compromising the backup system itself. Let's talk for a second about the steps we've taken to make that a very unlikely scenario. When Veritas was still part of Symantec, this technology was called Critical System Protection, CSP. For a number of years, we'll take the appliances platform to the Black Hat conference and offer a $10,000 prize to anyone who could crack into the system. No one was ever successful. The protections that made this possible are all grounded in zero trust principles, despite that not really being a big thing back then outside of the security world. The Appliance Intrusion Prevention Systems, IPS, consists of a custom Symantec data center security policy that runs automatically as startup. The IPS policy is an inline policy that can proactively block unwanted resource access behaviors before they can be acted upon by the operating system. Also, let's not forget, the appliances are purpose-built. They don't run a full-blown version of any operating system. Rather, they run a hardened and reduced version of Red Hat OS. We refer this as a way to reduce the attack surface. Secondly, only authorized devices are allowed to communicate with the NetBackup appliances. For example, if a client or other system doesn't have a valid digital certificate, of course issued by and known by NetBackup, then NetBackup will not allow it to communicate with NetBackup. This ensures only known good systems are talking with NetBackup, regardless of whether that machine is within the company's network. Zero trust communications. Thirdly, the appliance platform itself only authorized processes to be performed. In today's term, this is called allow listing. In earlier times, it was called whitelisting. It basically means that if a process is not specifically on the authorized list and therefore allowed to perform, it can't. Again, zero trust processes. Finally, appliances users, including root, have only required access privileges on the NetBackup appliances and nothing more, minimizing access to system's resources. Intrusion prevention system block unwanted resource access behaviors before they can be acted upon by the operating system of the appliance. Zero trust comms, no backup issued certificate, no communication allowed. Zero trust processes, only known authorized Veritas processes can run, nothing else. This, malware or ransomware can't even install itself. And zero trust privileges. Appliances users have only minimum required access privileges and nothing more, restricting access to system resources. Let's zoom in on one piece of the bigger picture we just saw, namely the native immutability provided by NetBackup Flex appliances. As I mentioned on the previous slide, this is the most secure option. It's important to note that everything on the left-hand side of the slide is the responsibility of the backup team. They build protection plans and set retention levels via our MSDP OST plugin. NetBackup can automate the storing of backup images on immutable storage. On the right side, we see various components of our immutable storage. Mind you, everything on this side of the slide is the responsibility of the security team. We sometimes joke that this is our 4 eyes approach, meaning no one admin level account is ever credentialed to do everything. You always need 4 eyes, or at a minimum 2 people. You immediately notice 2 key capabilities in the little gray box. The first is an independent compliance clock, meaning that altering the OS's clock to expire images can't happen for data stored immutability here. Second is 2 modes of immutability. First is compliance mode, which is very locked down. No matter which credentials you have, you will not be able to expire any images until the normal expiration date set for this storage. The second, enterprise mode, provides some flexibility, allowing for image expiration ahead of schedule for reasons like reclaiming storage. Even though enterprise mode allows for expiring images, it does require 2 admin level accounts working together to achieve this. And so there is no single point of failure for the immutability. It can be hard to protect all your data, especially if you don't even know where all the systems out there to protect. This is where Veritas can provide powerful detect capabilities to ensure there are 0 gaps in your ransomware resilience. First, our unique capabilities for reporting across production and backup environments cross-reporting to ensure no production systems are left unprotected. Veritas is the only vendor capable of reporting in this way, not only within our own data protection products, but across the wide spectrum of data protection solutions. Beyond visualizing the entire environment, Veritas helps detect the telltale markers of anomalous behavior that may indicate a ransomware attack is underway. Backups are often a target of threat actors, which is why we focus our AI and machine learning anomaly detection engines towards the backup process. Not only can these report pinpoint when an attack happened, helping to confirm last known good, but it gets better with use as the engine learns from feedback. Files are the ultimate target of ransomware, and we can help detect unusual activity here as well. From unusual write activity that could indicate an attack, to detecting known ransomware file extensions, even detecting unusual access activity based on individual use patterns. Collectively, these powerful capabilities ensure no corner of your environment stays in the dark and help keep attack vectors cut off. A good way to think about how this works is to envision a polygraph. When you take a polygraph test, the examiner will begin with pre-screening, where they ask a series of questions to establish parameters that will constitute normal. When you lie, the psychological indicators of blood pressure, pulse, respiration, and skin conductivity will fluctuate unexpectedly outside of the normal parameters established. Similarly, NetBackup will leverage an AI-powered detection engine to calculate parameters of what constitutes normal based on backup job metadata patterns over time and auto-adjust for custom backup policies. We can then precede the model using MB deploy utilities, which I know many of you are familiar with. Events that occur outside of the established normal are captured and backup teams are notified in real time. Anomalies observed are assigned a score based on severity, which is calculated based on the observed distance from cluster. The further the distance, the more severe the score. This is designed to help backup and security teams identify which insights are actionable and also to reduce false positives. Overall, the AI-powered anomaly detection engine in NetBackup helps you mine enormous amounts of data, automate monitoring and reporting, gain actionable insights, report based on several criteria, and importantly, establish early warning of an attack. The other side of the detect coin, so to speak, is actually detecting malware. And when coupled with anomaly detection, gives you a very comprehensive approach. As I mentioned on the previous slide, anomaly detection happens in near real time. After a backup occurs, we can spot check known high-risk areas. As I mentioned earlier about the recently published Threat Post article on how the contingent exploits some of our competitors' weaknesses and deletes their backups, spot checking the backups of internet-facing Windows clients, for instance, would be an example of where we would focus. Then finally, when you need to restore from backup, as in following a successful ransomware attack, we can scan the backup to make sure that you're recovering from clean data. The process of scanning before restore is a bit more cost-effective than scanning the entire storage. And as always, with Veritas, you have recovery options, be that to the cloud, bare metal, original source, secondary side, or whatever you might have. So we've seen a version of this enterprise workload image on a couple of previous slides. The point is to highlight the heterogeneous nature of today's enterprises, which are made up of generations of technology, both legacy and modern applications and infrastructures. And we've illustrated the protect and detect phases in a Veritas NetBackup world. However, the point ultimately of any backup is restore. It's the surety you gain from knowing you can recover that drives the backup behavior in the first place. With that understanding, and with understanding that hackers look for credentials to gain access to as many critical systems as possible, knowing that by doing so, they will increase the pain on you and therefore the likelihood of you paying the ransom. What happens when you have a different backup product for each environment? Are you ensuring you have a copy and restore point of your important data? Yes. Are you creating an optimized recovery experience that will help you get back up running quickly when you need to recover? I would argue no. Multiple disparate backup solutions by design create a complicated recovery experience, especially when multiple systems are compromised. The point is to highlight that when we think of backup as a checkbox, it might seem perfectly normal to just use whatever works, even multiple point products. But this approach would fail to consider what the recovery experience would be if multiple systems are compromised. We strongly advocate architecting and optimizing for recovery, not just checking the backup box. In addition to this, multiple disparate backup products also mean you have to train and maintain across multiple systems. You may lose some dedupe efficiencies, and you'll by design complicate your ability to enact global data visibility across all of these from a data management standpoint. Veritas advocates standardizing on a platform to really optimize for the recovery. So we have immutably stored data and we're keeping tabs on our environment. But what if, despite our best efforts, ransomware worms its way through? This is where it is important to complete the 3-2-1+1 methodology we often talk about at Veritas. At least 3 copies of your data, at least 2 distinct media types, like disk and cloud, and at least 1 offsite or segregated copy of the data, and at least 1 on immutable storage. Veritas NetBackup can easily and automatically ensure no single point of failure by configuring lifecycle policies that send data over to a secondary or even tertiary domain. We call this technology auto image replication, or AIR. With AIR configured, your data can be sent unidirectionally to a secure second location that can have different credentials configured and limited network capabilities, ensuring proper segmentation of your data protection environment. Of course, it doesn't stop here. As part of that same automatic lifecycle we configured for AIR, we can also send a copy of deduplicated, immutably stored data to the cloud. So now we're properly following the 3-2-1 model, but it sounds complex to get that all back when disaster strikes. What if I told you it can be as easy as a single click? Recovery need not be a one-size-fits-all. As we have mentioned, it is our goal to provide you with as many recovery options as possible, because this is what is critical for resiliency. Maybe not all of your environment is impacted, maybe just a portion. Granular file recovery helps you to quickly grab individual databases or files that will allow you to very quickly recover back to production. Sometimes it does happen that when your entire servers do get encrypted, and when that happens, bare metal recovery allows you to recover that entire server quickly. New to NetBackup 9.1, bulk instant recovery. NetBackup instant rollback for VMs allow you to recover large amounts of VMs back to production. Rollback 100 VMs concurrently in a minute. Cloud recovery includes the ability to restore both physical and virtual to the cloud. Also unique to Veritas, we can also do this from data that you have deduped to the cloud already. That's deduped data written to deduped storage that is immutable. That's AWS 3 object log, deduped data natively without a third-party steps or rehydration step involved. And it allows you to recover an entire data center on demand in the cloud when you need it, but without having to maintain that data center running 24/7. We will go into more detail on the next slide. And CDP, VRP, continuous data protection rollback. With Veritas Resiliency, we can configure a digital runbook that knows where our data is and can execute complex orchestrated recovery from a single file all the way to an entire data center. Importantly, any plan is only as good as the last time it was tested, which is why we make it easy and efficient to test plans with rehearsals that leverage the same single-click execution, but can leverage non-production resources such as network and sandbox environments. Collectively, the capabilities provided ensure that when ransomware strikes, your organizations will be ready to resist and recover. Specifically though, let's dive deeper on the cloud recovery. We talk about how Veritas is the only vendor that can send and store deduplicated data on AWS 3 object locked. Veritas is also the only vendor that can spin up an entire data center from this efficiently stored deduped data, providing options for recovery unmatched by any other providers in this space. According to our ransomware resiliency report in 2020, 57% of organizations hadn't tested their DR plans in the last 2 months. Now, that may not seem like a long period of time, but with the speed of data these days, I would actually disagree. What occurs in 2 months? 100 million of ransomware attacks going off this year? Friend. The reason many don't test is because testing can be incredibly disruptive to production environments. Not so with Veritas. That same orchestration we talked about on previous slide is also what powers our ability to do non-disruptive recovery testing. Veritas can help you set up one-click non-disruptive disaster recovery testing, create an immutable data vault, IDV, effectively utilize an isolated recovery environment, ensure confidence that ransomware recovery will be successful when it counts. In 2020, we had 100%, I repeat, 100% recovery success rate with every customer who opened a support case following a ransomware attack. And we're tracking towards a repeat performance in 2021. Initially, we started out with the goal of articulating how we can achieve immunity against a ransomware attack, and specifically tackling the most prominent customer challenges being articulated. And we've talked through a number of best practices in protect, detect, and recover to help answer those questions. But I want to take a second here to really hammer home 5 particular best practices and actions that you can take right now. First is to upgrade and expand your NetBackup estate today. Upgrade because, as Greg mentioned, don't fight with today's ransomware with yesterday's technology. All the technical capabilities we discussed today are part of the NetBackup 9 platform released. Expand because we need to be architecting for an optimized recovery experience that reduces any potential downtime as much as possible. NetBackup supports more enterprise workloads than any other vendor. That protection is unified across the board, and that helps keep you in control. The second is certainly a best practice, but it contains a slight modification. 3-2-1 has been a backup best practice for many years. 3 copies, 2 different storage mediums, 1 offline. But now we're adding another one to that, which is at least 1 copy on immutable and indelible storage. Third, architect with zero trust in mind. Jim from Microsoft spoke to the privileged identity access, an interesting concept around zero trust credentials, so to speak. Credentials become just in time and expire within a short time frame. Follow the model we've built into our appliances, or just buy our appliances. That is, zero trust comms, zero trust processes, and zero trust user access. Fourth, optimize for recovery, not just making copies. Think of the recovery experience. If that lands you on the standardizing on NetBackup, great. Our clients, Cypress Trading, Steelcase, and Liberty came to the same conclusion. Test your recovery as often as possible. Use automation and orchestration to simplify and speed up the recovery process to limit downtime and the damaging effects on your business. And fifth, unlock total visibility across your data, applications, and infrastructure. Veritas can help you do this, not just within NetBackup, but even with our competitors' products. Take advantage of anomaly detection and malware scanning, which will only get better and more powerful over time. And finally, don't ever allow the reason you're paying a ransom be because you didn't have the right data protection and management solution in place. Thank you.